The world was broken. The skies were no longer blue. The ground cracked beneath every step, and the wind carried the smell of ash. But in the middle of this ruined planet, one small light burned bright. A food stall, standing alone, untouched. By time or war, it looked strange, almost funny. A metal cart with a roof made from old solar panels. Smoke gently rose from its chimney, and the scent of hot food filled the air. Alien girls, tall and short, strong and thin, gathered around it. Their stomachs empty, their eyes full of hunger. They came from every corner of the galaxy, each one hoping that the rumors were true. That a human man had food when no one else did. His name was Jake, a quiet man. With a short beard and sharp eyes, he wore an old jacket, patched in many places. He stood behind the counter, calm and serious. He flipped something in a pan. The sizzle breaking the silence. One alien girl stepped forward. She had green skin, large purple eyes, and her bones stuck out under her skin. "I will work for food," she whispered, her voice shaking. Jake didn't answer. He placed a hot piece of bread on a metal plate and handed it to her. She took it slowly, like it might vanish. Tears filled her eyes as she took the first bite. She fell to her knees, chewing with her whole face glowing in joy. Others watched, some jealous, some desperate. A taller girl stepped forward, her scales shining dark blue. "I can give you something better," she said, leaning in close. Jake raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. He handed her a bowl of soup and turned away. A small group of alien girls began whispering among themselves. "Why? Is he here? Where does the food come from? There's no farmland left. There's no power anywhere." One of them, with sharp red hair and 4 arms, leaned closer. "I heard he made a deal with something," she said, voice low. "No one can have food like this after the sky burned." Jake didn't seem to care what they said. He cleaned the counter, stirred the pot, and wiped his hands on a towel. He worked like a man who had a purpose. But no one knew what that purpose was that night, as the stars tried to shine through the dusty sky. A young alien girl fell near his stall. She had no shoes, no bag, nothing but rags wrapped around her. She looked no older than 15. Her body shaking, Jake walked over, kneeling beside her. "Help," she whispered, her voice so soft it was almost gone. Jake didn't ask questions. He picked her up and carried her inside his stall. He wrapped her in a thermal blanket and poured warm soup into her mouth. She cried, but not from pain, from relief. Then she passed out, safe and full for the first time in days, outside. The other girls watched with strange expressions, some confused, some touched, some angry. Why her? One of them muttered, "She didn't offer anything." Another hissed, but Jake didn't explain. He just kept cooking, kept serving. Suddenly, a sound echoed from the far hills. A low humming, like an engine, but deeper. Jake's eyes turned sharp. He looked toward the horizon and muttered, "Too early." One of the alien girls heard him. "What do you mean?" she asked, stepping closer. He didn't reply. Instead, he walked to the back of his stall. He opened a box, pulled out a strange-looking object half-weapon. Half-tool, he placed it under the counter, hidden but ready. Then the girl who had fainted woke up. Her eyes opened wide as she looked up at Jake. Her lips trembled, and she said something strange. "They're coming," she whispered. They followed the smell. Jake froze. The alien girls around the stall suddenly fell silent. In the distance, the humming grew louder. "Who's coming?" one girl asked, but the fainted girl had passed out again. Jake looked at the girls, his face serious. He reached under the stall and locked something. Then he said, almost too softly, "You should all go before night falls." But none of them moved. Their hunger was stronger than fear. And Jake knew they were no longer just visitors. They were part of something bigger. Something he couldn't stop now. As the dark engines drew closer, and shadows moved on the horizon, Jake stood at his stall.com, ready and still cooking. Because even at the end of the world, someone had to feed the hungry, and Jake. He had everything. The soup pot hissed softly as steam curled into the air, mixing with the scent of cooked meat and warm bread. But tonight, it didn't bring peace, only tension. Jake stood at his food stall with a metal ladle in one hand and a strange weapon hidden just below the counter. The stars above were quiet, but the ground rumbled slightly under his boots. Not like thunder, but like something moving slow and heavy. The alien girls around his stall stayed silent. Their sharp ears and antennae twitched with unease. The glow of the food stall lights painted soft colors on their skin, but none of them felt warm anymore. Not with the sound drawing nearer. A shape appeared from the dark. It wasn't big, but it moved with purpose. A thin figure wrapped in armor made from bone and metal. His steps were smooth, too smooth for a scavenger. One of the alien girls gasped, her hand reaching for Jake's sleeve. "That's not a traitor," she whispered. "That's a scout." Jake didn't speak. He slowly turned down the heat on his stove and stepped out from behind the stall, his face calm, unreadable, like he had seen this many times before. The armored figure stopped a few steps away, then removed his helmet. His skin was a dull gray. His eyes sharp like knives. His smile was too wide, too dry. Like he hadn't eaten in days. "Smells good," he said, voice full of mockery. "Human cooking still draws flies, doesn't it?" Jake didn't blink. "You lost." He asked quietly. The scout laughed. "Not at all. I came with a message." The alien girls stepped back, some gripping small weapons, some holding each other. The scout's eyes flicked to them. A lot of mouths to feed. "You sure you can handle all that, human?" Jake stayed silent. He reached behind the counter and placed a hot plate of food down slowly. His way of showing confidence, of showing power, without a word. He turned and continued cooking like the scout wasn't even there. The scout's grin faded. "You're guarding something. I can smell it energy. Rare tech, maybe even a relic." Jake flipped a piece of meat, the sizzle the only answer, but the girls around him noticed something. A new scent in the air, not just food, but heat and old metal, the kind of scent that came before a storm. "You think you can hide behind your food stall forever?" the scout asked, stepping closer. "The warlords are hungry, human. Just like your little fans here, but we don't trade smiles or offers." Jake finally looked up. His eyes were tired. But there was fire behind them. "Tell your warlord," he said slowly. "If he's hungry, he can come himself." The scout tilted his head. "That's what he wants, and when he comes, there won't be any food left without another word." The scout turned and vanished into the shadows as fast. As he came, he was gone. But his words stayed behind like a sickness in the wind. The girls began whispering again. "He knows. They're watching. We should run." But one girl, younger than the rest, stepped forward. Her eyes big and honest, her hands shaking. "Why do they fear your food stall so much?" she asked softly. "What's really here?" Jake paused, staring into the soup. Then, almost like he was talking to himself, he said, "Because this stall feeds more than bodies." The girl didn't understand, but something in his voice made her step back as the others argued about leaving or staying. She walked behind the stall, curious. She found a small hatch behind the food crates. It was strange, out of place, made of alien material. It hummed faintly when she touched it. Jake turned around fast, eyes sharp. "Don't," he said firmly. She froze, her fingers still on the edge of the hatch. "What's under there?" she asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached over and slowly closed the hatch with one hand, locking it with a quiet click. "If you want to eat," he said calmly, "don't ask too many questions." Night fell harder. Then the stars. blinked behind dusty clouds, and far in the distance. The scouts' words echoed silently in every heart. They were not just in front of a food stall. They were standing on the edge of something powerful and dangerous. The girl never ate a single bite, not once. Every day she came to Jake's stall. She sat in the same spot on the corner crate near the broken lantern. She never asked for food, never reached for a plate. She just watched, quiet and still, like a statue made of soft light and secrets. Her skin was pale blue, with tiny glowing lines that pulsed along her arms. Her eyes were silver, without pupils, and her hair looked like strands of fog. She didn't speak to the other alien girls. She didn't smile. She just stared at Jake, as if she was studying something only she could see. Jake noticed, of course. He always noticed more than he said, but he never questioned her, never chased her away. He would sometimes glance her way, but never asked why she came. And maybe that's why she stayed, one afternoon, as the other girls gathered to get stew and grilled fungus. The silent girl stepped closer to the stall. She stood just a foot from Jake now. Still quiet, still not blinking. Jake placed a chocolate bar on the counter in front of her. It was rare, too rare. No one had seen chocolate since before the firestorms. The girl looked at it but didn't touch it. She said nothing, just tilted her head slightly, like she was confused. Then she finally spoke, and her voice was soft, nearly soundless. "Why did you give me this?" Jake didn't stop working, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "You haven't eaten," he said. "I thought you might like something sweet." She looked down at the chocolate, then back at him. "I don't eat," she replied. "I only feel." That sentence made one of the nearby girls drop her spoon. They all turned to stare. Jake placed the last of the stew into a bowl and handed it to someone without looking away from the pale girl. "You're not starving like the rest," he said. "So what are you really here for?" The girl stepped even closer, just inches from the counter. "I know where your food comes from," she whispered. "I've felt its energy before." Long ago, Jake's jaw tightened, just slightly. "You're mistaken," he said. But his voice was no longer calm. It was heavy, like something inside him had shifted. "No," she said. "I remember the taste of this feeling." Then she pointed not at the food, but at the ground beneath the stall. "There's a door," she whispered. "It sings." The wind around them fell silent. Even the usual crackling of the fire seemed to stop for a breath. The girl placed her hand flat on the stall's counter. "It's not a kitchen, it's a cradle," she said. "And it wants to wake up." Jake dropped the ladle into the pot, letting it splash. Then he leaned forward, his face close to hers. "If you know what it is," he said slowly, "then you should also know what happens if the wrong ones find it." The girl nodded, her silver eyes glowing softly. "They already know," she said. "That scout wasn't just a scout, he was a marker." Jake cursed under his breath. He turned quickly and opened the back of the stall. He pressed his hand against a hidden panel, and the floor made a deep metallic click. A hatch opened silently, revealing a dark hole with a soft pulsing light inside. The pale girl didn't move. The other alien girls watched in shock, none daring to breathe. Jake stepped halfway down the hatch ladder. He turned and looked at her. "You want to know where it comes from?" he said, voice hard. "Come see." She followed him into the dark, and for a moment, the stall above seemed empty, cold, abandoned, until the hatch sealed again, locking with a sound that made every girl shiver. Beneath the stall, the walls glowed. With shifting lights, symbols danced like liquid stars. The girl stared in awe, her fingers tracing the air, not touching, just sensing. "It's alive," she whispered. "It doesn't make food. It creates." Jake moved to a control panel and inserted an old cracked chip. The machine hummed and a hologram blinked to life, showing seeds, fruits, meals, Then a second screen flickered on, showing faces of warlords, scouts, enemies. "They're all looking for this," Jake said, "and they'll burn everything to get it." The girl turned to him, her eyes wide. "Then you need help," she said. "Real help." Jake looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. "Tomorrow," he said, "you'll stand beside me, or you'll run like the others." She smiled faintly. "I don't eat," she said again, "but I do protect what feeds the future." And the machine pulsed gently behind them, as if it understood every word. It didn't feel like a kitchen. It felt like a beating heart buried under metal and silence. As Jake and the pale girl moved deeper underground, the air grew warm and strange. The walls pulsed with light, not like electricity, but like something breathing. The passage was narrow, curving like a tunnel inside a living creature. Symbols glowed along the ceiling. Ancient and unreadable, but somehow familiar to her. Jake said nothing. He walked ahead with a lantern in one hand and a blade on his belt. The pale girl followed quietly, her fingers twitching every time the lights changed color. This wasn't just some forgotten machine. This place had memory. At the end of the tunnel, they reached a chamber. It was circular, wide, and filled with floating screens and strange glass containers. Inside those containers were small, growing things, bread loaves still baking, glowing fruits forming from light, meat taking shape from vapor. The girl gasped. "This is no food replicator," she whispered. "This is evolution." Jake turned to her, his face unreadable. "I found it 10 years ago," he said. "Back when the sky first fell, it was buried under the ash." Still alive, still waiting, she moved toward a container and placed her palm against the glass. The food inside responded, pulsing faster. "It responds to you," Jake said, surprised. "It's reacting like it knows you." The girl nodded slowly. "My people once worshipped the stars. They believed certain machines were sacred, holy, built by those who came before even us." She stepped back and looked at him with wide eyes. This might be one of them." Jake walked over to a control node and typed in a few commands. A hologram appeared, an image of the stall above ground. Red lights flashing around it. Jake frowned. "They've marked it," he said. "The warlords? Men know the exact location now. They'll come with more than scouts next time." The girl's expression grew colder. "Then you can't keep hiding. You must protect it now." Jake stared at the hologram for a long time. Then he sighed and pulled out a small glowing key from a pouch on his chest. "I've never used this," he said. "Didn't want to risk waking it fully." He handed it to her. "You seem to understand it more than I do." Her fingers closed around the key, and a soft humming filled the chamber. The walls brightened, and something deep in the floor rumbled. Then above ground, a panel on the side of the food stall slid open by itself, revealing a hidden turret and a defense shield node. The alien girls outside jumped back in shock, staring at the transformation back below. The girl looked around as the machine reacted to her touch. The chamber shifted walls, sliding, revealing more rooms, more storage. One door opened to show rows of seed-like orbs glowing with potential. "Is this food?" she asked. Jake stepped beside her and nodded. "Food, medicine, water, all made from energy and memory. It reads our needs and makes what we desire." She turned slowly to him. "Then this isn't just a stall," she said. "It's a cradle of survival." Jake nodded, his face heavy. "And now everyone wants to steal it." Suddenly, the lights flickered red. A screen flashed warnings in multiple alien languages. A map showed movement, multiple life signs approaching fast. Jake cursed under his breath and grabbed the blade from his belt. "They're early," he muttered. "Get ready." The girl didn't flinch. She placed the key into a small slot on the wall, and the chamber roared to life. Above ground, more Panels opened around the stall, forming a small wall of energy. The other alien girls screamed and scattered at first, but some didn't run. They stood and faced the oncoming shadows with wide eyes and shaking hands. They had seen what the food had done. They had felt warmth and kindness from the man behind the stall. And now, they couldn't leave him alone below. Jake looked at the girl as the entire underground structure powered up. "Whatever happens now," he said, "there's no going back." She gave him a small smile. "I never came here to eat," she replied. "I came here to stand." And as the enemy crept closer through the night fog, the last food stall on Earth prepared for war, not with an army, but with the power to feed a broken world. And a handful of girls who were once starving now, ready to fight. The sky didn't roar, it cracked like glass under pressure. Blades of light cut through the night as the first shots landed near the food stall. Dust and fire exploded in the air, burning holes in the soft shadows. The alien girls screamed and ducked behind rocks and broken walls, but Jake didn't run. He stepped out from the stall with smoke on his boots and silence in his chest. He held something old in his hands, not a tool, but a hybrid of both. It had no name, just a pulse that matched his heartbeat, and when he raised it, the ground shook. The first enemy appeared like a shadow in armor. It moved fast, faster than anything should. But Jake pulled the trigger, and the pulse slammed it backward. Crashing into the dirt with a hiss, the weapon didn't fire bullets, it fired memory. Raw and heavy, every time he used it, the machine below remembered more. The stall's walls snapped open fully now, forming a circular dome of energy. It wasn't just protecting food anymore, it was protecting hope. Panels flickered and unfolded, forming barriers, reflectors, even turrets. The alien girls watched in disbelief. This wasn't just a stall, it was a fortress. The pale girl stood on top of the cart now, her hair blowing like smoke. In one hand, she held a rod made of the same glowing material as the underground core. She raised it, and light rippled outward, blinding the enemy scouts crawling closer. Then, something unexpected happened. 3 alien girls once Jake had fed many times before rushed to the stall. They didn't run away. One threw Jake a pouch of metal shards. Another slammed a control button she'd seen him use before. The third pulled a tiny drone from her bag and sent it flying to spot the next wave. "We're not just mouths anymore," one of them shouted. "We're shields too." Jake didn't speak, but his nod was heavy. He turned back to the edge of the barrier, where the scout leader had returned, this time with more soldiers. The warlord hadn't come himself, but he had sent his best beasts in armor, weapons, too sharp for Hunger Games. They didn't want food. They wanted the power to control it. The pale girl pointed her rod, and the stall responded. Roots of energy burst from the ground, trapping enemy legs and pulling their weapons from their hands. Every part of the stall was alive now, and every girl who stood by Jake could feel it. Suddenly, a blast struck the side of the stall. One of the girls screamed as she was thrown backward. Jake ran to her, lifted her in his arms, and pulled her behind the shield line. Her eyes fluttered open, and she whispered, "Why are you doing this? You could just run." Jake looked down at her, his voice low and steady. "Because no one ran when I was starving," he said. "And someone once gave me food when I had nothing." The girl smiled weakly and held his wrist. "Then we'll fight with you," she said, "until our hands can't hold anything but hope." The scouts were regrouping, preparing a larger attack. Jake returned to the center of the stall, where the pale girl was channeling the core. She looked at him and said, "They want to control hunger, but you give it away. That's why they hate you. That's why they're afraid." Jake reloaded the pulse weapon with a crystal chip glowing bright blue. "Then let them fear what kindness can do," he answered. Outside, the sky cracked again. But this time, the light came from the stall. A beam of energy shot into the clouds. It was a signal not just to enemies, but to anyone still alive, a signal that something still stood, a place where food, safety, and courage still burned, and far beyond the hills. Something else stirred, a different power, watching, waiting, deciding whether to help or destroy. But for now, Jake had what he needed. A stall that could fight, a machine that could create, and girls who no longer begged but stood, strong and full. They were no longer just hungry. They were his army, and the stall kept cooking, even during war. Because even in battle, someone had to feed the future. The girl didn't knock. She just fell to her knees in front of the stall. Her skin was cracked from sunburn. Her clothes torn. She crawled forward, with shaking hands and eyes full of wild hope. Around her neck hung a broken necklace of wooden beads, and in her hand she held nothing but a torn photo of a child. Jake stepped out from behind the stall with a bowl in his hand. But she didn't reach for the food. She bowed her head low and whispered, "Please, save my village. I have nothing left to give, except myself." The words hung in the air, heavy and full of dust. The alien girls around the stall looked at her, shocked. Not because of what she said, but because they'd all once felt the same. Jake placed the bowl on the counter and crouched beside her. He didn't touch her. He just asked quietly, "How many are still alive?" The girl's voice cracked, maybe 30. "They eat roots and dirt. The water burns. The children cry in their sleep." I followed the smell of bread. Across the desert, Jake looked at the others, then back toward the hills. There were no safe paths left, only broken roads and burned bridges. But he stood and walked back into the stall. The girl stayed kneeling, waiting for rejection. Instead, she heard a soft hum, the sound of the core activating. The pale girl stepped forward and helped the woman up. "His kindness doesn't come with a price," she said gently. "But once you accept it, you can never go back to silence." Jake returned with a small seed, glowing faintly in a glass shell. He handed it to the girl and said, "Take this to your village, plant it under the sky, and wait. It will feed your people, but only if you believe they still have a future." The girl trembled, holding the warm seed like a newborn life. "I don't understand," she said. "What is it?" Jake smiled just a little. "It's hunger turned into hope." She clutched it to her chest and whispered, "I will protect it." Then she turned and walked into the dust, heading back into the wild. No army, no map, just belief. After she left, the others turned to Jake. One asked, "You just give your power away like that?" Jake replied, "She didn't ask to own it. She asked to share it, but not all were happy." From the crowd, another girl stepped forward. Harder, she gave nothing. "We offer ourselves, our strength, our loyalty," she gave. Tears. Jake looked at her without emotion. "You offer deals, trades," he said. "But I'm not a merchant. I feed people. I don't buy them." His words stung, but they struck deep. The girls realized he wasn't gathering followers. He was creating something older, something stronger. Suddenly, a sharp beep echoed through the stall. A warning screen lit up strange energy near the western ridge, but this time it wasn't warlords. It was something older. The pale girl leaned in, her hand glowing against the console. Her voice dropped low. "It's not them, it's the source." Jake's expression changed. He opened a sealed drawer and pulled out a heavy object, an ancient key with wires and bone fused together. "I never wanted to use this," he said. "But if the source is waking, then we're no longer hiding, we're inviting." Outside, the girls gathered close. Some afraid, some curious, some ready. Jake placed the key into a slot on the side of the stall. The ground shook gently, and a strange tower rose from beneath. The cart, it looked like a beacon, metal mixed with roots, blinking slowly, a signal reaching into the stars. Calling something back, Jake turned to the girls. "This stall was never meant to be alone," he said. "It was built to serve, to protect, and one day to awaken what sleeps under the ashes." The pale girl nodded, her silver eyes flashing. "And now the stars are listening." In the distance, the wind changed, not hot, not dry, something cooler, something clean, like the breath of something returning, and above them all, the signal blinked again, inviting not just danger, but destiny. The stars blinked once, then opened their eyes. Across the sky, a soft hum spread like a slow breath waking after centuries of sleep. The beacon above Jake's stall glowed brighter, rising taller, as if reaching for something no one else could see. Alien girls stood in silence around the food stall, their shadows stretching in the golden light. They had come here for food, but now they were guarding something greater. From the horizon came the enemy, this time not on foot. They flew on black-winged machines, their bodies glowing with stolen energy. At their front was a tall warlord in broken armor, face half machine, voice like thunder, human. He growled through speakers and static. "Step away from the cradle. It belongs to the strong." Jake didn't move. He stood behind his food stall like it was a throne. The pale girl stood beside him, her rod glowing like a small sun behind them. The stall shifted, opening more panels, showing more than food. The warlord raised his arm, and the machines charged forward. Lasers and fire lit the dust. The alien girls didn't run. They stepped forward instead, each one carrying something Jake had given them. One girl threw a light seed that exploded into a wall of vines. Another activated her bracelet gifted by Jake that blocked incoming shots. A third simply stood in front of a younger child, eyes closed, holding a shield made of warmth. Jake raised the weapon born from memory and heartache. He fired once, twice, and the land echoed with the sound of choice. The warlord's army began. Too slow, not because of injury, but confusion. They weren't facing weapons, they were facing belief. And belief doesn't crack easily. The pale girl spoke, her voice strong now. "You came to steal food," she said, "but this is not food. This is what comes after hunger." The warlord roared and leaped forward. Jake stepped out to meet him. They clashed not with brute force, but with will. Jake dodged, struck, fell, rose again. Each time he touched the ground, the stall responded, feeding him power. Not from rage, but from every soul he had nourished. The final blow came not from Jake, but from the girls. They joined hands, formed a ring around the stall. Their voices rose together in song, in memory. The machine below answered with a beam of pure light. It struck the warlord mid-air, shattering his armor and dropping him to the dust. The battle ended not in silence, but in peace. The sky opened for the first time in years, showing stars without dust. The food stall dimmed, quiet now, but complete. Jake stood in the middle, covered in ash and sweat, the pale girl beside him, her hand warm in his. The girls gathered close, their eyes no longer hungry, only filled with something new, something called belonging. Later that night, Jake looked at the sky. The beacon had stopped blinking, but in its place, a ship approached, not in war, but in answer. A ship from the stars, guided by the signal. The pale girl turned to him. "They heard," she said. "They're coming not to take, but to learn." Jake smiled softly. "Then let's give them what we gave each other," he said, "not just food, but reason to hope." The food stall glowed once more. This time, not with hunger, but with history. A history born from ash, from kindness, from the choice to feed instead of fight. And in the middle of a ruined world, one man, one stall, and a group of once starving alien girls became the spark that fed the stars again.